Welcome to the Bridge to Tomorrow's Talent, the podcast where we explore real world challenges and inspiring solutions behind preparing the next generation for success in the real world of work. I'm your host, Dale Marsden, founder and chief visionary of Tomorrow's Talent. We help forward thinking leaders build powerful pathways for emerging talent, closing the gap between education and professional careers. On the show, I sit down with leaders across business, education, and workforce development to uncover what it truly takes to close the gap between emerging talent and opportunity. So today I have with me John Mura. John Mura has interesting history in Tomorrow's Talent because John was the first visionary leader I had met in the real world of work, if you will, who saw a vision for this work of connecting our young adults to meaningful careers. And John, first, before we get really jump into any deep content, where are you calling in from today? And tell us a little bit about the last few years, because you retired, I think, or rewired about 5 years ago, if I recall.
Yeah, that's correct. I went ahead and retired in 2022, obviously working in San Bernardino County, California. I'm originally from upstate New York, just north of Syracuse. My wife and I had purchased a vacation home many, many years ago to make sure that my kids had that upstate New York experience as well as the benefit of Southern California and all that provides them. When we got closer and closer to retirement, we just kind of had to sit down mapping out our future and decided that upstate New York and the slower pace and the small town environment was really what we were looking for after being in the gerbil wheel of Southern California for so many
Yeah,
years.
for sure.
So it's been a couple of years now, and it's a huge transition, but we're really enjoying ourselves.
That's great. And you're doing some consulting kind of now, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. I went ahead and opened up a small consulting firm. It's just myself, Keller Consulting, where I help individuals, mostly executive coaching, kind of conflict resolution, helping CEOs and other leaders in the water space kind of get their minds around some alternatives that maybe they're blind to, given the fact that they're in the throes.
Yeah.
So I just have a couple clients, which is perfect for me.
Yeah.
I can sink my teeth into really investing in the next generation of leaders.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's the highest form of leadership when you step away from being successful, and you were very successful in your work, and transitioning that knowledge to others so they can lead well. I think that's great. Jim Collins used to talk about this level 5 leader, and you certainly are that. I was racking my brain, John, trying to remember where we first met. I know we connected in the community somewhere. I don't know if you remember, or maybe you remember the first time we kind of really connected around the work of bridging our young people to the real world.
Yeah, I think it was a task force that was established by the county of San Bernardino to look at economic development and job creation. And I think it was the chairman of the board of the county supervisors,
Okay.
Kurt Hagman, maybe was the initiator of it.
Okay.
And there was a cross section of leaders within San Bernardino County.
Yeah.
And I just had the pleasure. I think it was more destiny than consequence that you and I sat next to each other.
Yeah.
And at that time, we were really in a growth spurt at East Valley Water District, and I think you were really kind of working hard on pathways and trying to get a couple of them off the ground. And I was extremely interested in what you had to say, and quite frankly, the different tack that you were taking towards, preparing that next generation for the job market. And you and I just kind of hit it off, and I think you invited me to a breakfast or a lunch to kind of talk more, given we were kind of in a confined space at that time. And I think the rest is history, Dale. I mean, we just hit it off, and I think that we had a very similar, I think, idea of how we could contribute to that region and that area. Obviously, there's a lot of needs, and you had done a great job there. And again, East Valley was in a growth spurt, and I think any organization really needs to not only say they want to invest in their employee group, but actually do something about it. So you really allowed me a way to take it from talk to action.
Yeah, that's awesome. And John's talking about when I was superintendent in San Bernardino City Unified School District, one of the 10 large urbans in California, 50,000 kids, 8,000 employees. And we were one of the lowest performing large urbans in the state. And in our work together as a team, we transitioned that school district to be one of the highest performing high poverty school districts in the state of California, and grew our pathways from 5 to 55 pathways. And John was one of those community leaders that really saw the beauty of an ecosystem of leaders working together to create opportunities for our youth, and really seeing that development as an economic development strategy for our community. And going back to the vision of the county of San Bernardino at the time that John's speaking to, is they had a cradle to career vision, and they really worked hard to inspire other leaders in hosts of fields to make this kind of connection. And John, I was just inspired by your visionary leadership as we got talking. And here you were building a premier water treatment facility across the street from one of our high schools. And I'll never forget, you were standing there with me at the ribbon cutting for the Advanced Manufacturing Pathway Lab at Indian Springs High School. And, you were just dreaming out loud with me. What if we could do something like this for water? I mean, take me back to that, because that was, I think, kind of a big starting point for us, really.
Yeah, no, it was. And I think maybe if you don't mind, I'll take one step back even
Yeah.
further. We had just conducted a strategic plan and determined that, we needed to do something with recycled water and reuse. And so that was kind of the start of the Sterling Natural Resources Center, which you alluded to was going to be ultimately located right across from a whole K through kindergarten through 12, complex. I mean, you had a high school, middle school, and an elementary school right there within the zone. But what we had done a strategic plan, and again, we were looking at our workforce, and being in the public sector with the benefit of early retirement and a pension, we came to the conclusion that over 40% of our work population was eligible for retirement within 5 years.
Wow.
So we were facing a gray tsunami, and I know a lot of people have talked about it, but strategically, we're just like, how are we going to replace these highly skilled, highly trained, super motivated employees so that we could continue on our path of excellence? So it really was, I think, an eye opener for me and my staff to say, hey, we need to start doing something, because unfortunately, we weren't getting a lot of younger people coming into the field, into the water and treatment field, and we didn't know what to do. So again, it was just really, I think, destiny that you and I ran into each other. And as we started talking and engaging, I think a year later, or maybe a year and a half later, is when the Sterling Natural Resources Center kind of came to fruition, and the planning and the locating of that project really kind of brought everything together.
Yeah.
So I think that's really how it kind of started, Dale. And, I think the rest is history. I mean, they still continue to have a great relationship with, San Bernardino County School District. It's my understanding that we've got 2 or 3 employees now that actually came through the pathway program. And, so it's bearing fruit is really what it really,
Yeah.
it did not only what we thought it was going to do, but I think exceeded our expectations.
Yeah, and it's incredible for me to look in the rearview mirror now. Here we are, Tomorrow's Talent's 5 years going into our 6th year, and we've grown from 1 employee to 30 employees, and serving multiple counties, and doing some work now in Nevada, and moving across the states as we grow. And you were our first client. You said, yeah, let's do this. Let's connect the kids to get them ready. And I'll never forget, we had just a handful. It was during COVID. We took this on during probably one of the worst possible times. But your team and worked together to really connect our kids while they were in school, in high school, completing some of the, you talked about the certifications they needed to get an entry level job, and you built this structure, and had that support to, walk them through this journey of preparedness, and get them into the space. Talk a little bit about that journey from your view of what it takes for a young person to get a great start in the water district, because you have a lot of people knocking at your door, but again, they may not be qualified. And you're looking for qualified people. And how in the world did we end up getting kids out of high school? I'm thinking of David Rojas, 1 year out of high school, he's making $57,600 a year with an incredible employer. And it's not an easy place to get into. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it really starts with my journey. You know what I mean? I don't think I ever lacked for intelligence or even drive. I just didn't have an interest in traditional school. And I know that, for generations now, we've kind of had this on ramp into high school, into higher education. And And I'm not trying to knock that or devalue the importance of college education and earning your degree. But for me, it wasn't an interest, it wasn't a passion, so therefore I didn't apply myself. I was fortunate enough to stumble into this public sector, public works arena just really by happenstance. And again, it really provided me a fantastic career path. And I wanted to share that experience with others. Ultimately, I went to school at night. Once I understood how I wanted to apply my time and talent, I understood that education, higher education, was, an impediment for me to reach my career objectives. So, there's got to be a way for us to engage these kids who aren't on a path to go to a 4-year institution right out of high school. And again, I think you were way ahead of the curve. Obviously, if you look at education trends now, Dale, I mean, everything you look at and everything you read about is exactly what you were doing and talking about 5-7 years ago.
Yeah.
And then once I met you, and I was super inspired by the existing pathways that you had. As I recall, you had 2 or 3. Advanced manufacturing was one, as I recall, and I think the healthcare pathway was up and running too.
Yeah.
And it just was like the light bulb went off in my head. It's just like, wow, I could sit here and talk to kids and meet them, on the ground and tell them my story and how I was able to, kind of ascend. But I mean, you're actually doing something about it at scale. So I was super inspired, and obviously trusting you and your team is not hard to do. I mean, you're super inspirational, and you always follow through in everything you did. So it wasn't like I took a big risk. And it just was a perfect match. And as I started to see and engage with some of these students, I was ultimately really inspired. And it really became a passion of mine personally and professionally, to not only as a public servant in the utility arena, to kind of expand how we can dedicate and improve the communities that we serve through alternate measures, not just the bare bone deliver water and sewer. At the end of the day, if you're serving a community that's struggling, that doesn't matter how good your organization is, you're in an ecosystem that's struggling, you're not going to be as successful as you want to be. So as you start to look outward and how you can make investments in the human infrastructure, not just the hardcore infrastructure, it really just made a whole lot of sense. And again, you had a great group of people around you. There was already a template that was already in place. So it was really easy for me to convince not only my staff, but my board of directors that this is a viable option for us to invest in the future workforce of our organization and ultimately improve our community. It was just a win-win.
Yeah, John, you hit something that's, rings a bell for me, and that is that this is ecosystem work. And, I observed, from being a low performing school district with not many kids graduating, according to the standard, and to 93% graduating, where I could sit on the stage and the principal would know 3 to 6 names of kids that weren't graduating, what was going on for them, a special plan. So we were graduating kids. I was shaking a lot of hands, but it hit me that, when our kids leave that graduation stage, there's no system, no people that own them. There's no structure that owns them. And same thing for kids in community college or 4-year universities. I mean, the data tells us, and, kids go off in public ed, it's the holy grail is to get kids to graduate and go to college, which is wonderful. And it's necessary. We preach college and career. There's a point where you might need either or both, depending on where you're going. But even kids who graduate college, 53% are unemployed, and the data tells us they remain that way for up to 10 years. What a tragedy to a community when we have this kind of lack of infrastructure to support our youth at any level, from the education system to the real world. And, I sometimes struggle. Who do you, from your view, who owns this? Because there's no entity, there's no system that has it, especially in traditionally marginalized communities or high poverty communities. I mean, maybe speak to that a little bit. From your view, who owns this work?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what we want, whether you're a parent or you're just an engaged community member, we want to see that next generation succeed and be independent and not be stuck in the mom's basement or saddled with a bunch of debt without any real marketable skills. And I think, you and I talked about it at East Valley Water District, primarily we're a water and sewer agency, but if you get, within the organization, we've got engineering, we've got IT, we've got, community outreach. I mean, you got accounting and billing, and So there's a whole cross section of careers underneath that umbrella within the old organization I worked for. So if you can get these kids interested in entry level positions, just like the path I took, I started off shoveling asphalt, but realized that, you know what I mean? There's other things I can do within this, that, you know, in this career, that may require education, might require some certification. So, you know, you and I started talking about that listen, if we can get these kids inspired and trained up to be able to, you know, start our career, they're going to get their eyes open to a whole other, you know, a whole bunch of opportunities that they didn't know anything about. I mean, you know, let's think about it, Dale. You and I are 18, 19 years old. I didn't know what I wanted to be
Yeah.
when I grew up.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I'm 58. And I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So we need to have these kids get exposed to different opportunities and different ideas. And then the light bulb goes off and the inspiration. And then all of a sudden, now they're dedicated to something. And the education or the training that they received is it ends to the means, right? I mean, they're not just doing it because mom wanted them to do it or because society thought that was important. Now it becomes important to them. And then they can target their you know, professional development efforts, you know, to the next job or the next position or the next title that they want to go after. Or a lot of them, I mean, what we found is, you know, it's a great job, you know, working as a water treatment or sewer treatment operator. And, you know, there's a lot of people that get a big charge out of, you know, those jobs and, you know, what they bring to the table and how they're, you know, lending their talents to the community. And that's great if everybody doesn't want to become the CEO or, you know what I mean, chief vision officer or a founder of a company. You know, everybody has their own ceiling. I think it's up to us to provide those on ramps just to show kids what's out there and provide them exposure and let them gravitate to what they're truly interested in. And that's exactly what you do. You expose kids to things that they probably never even heard of. Most people don't know anything about that, you know, public service career path and how diversified it is and how many different, you know, kinds of careers you can actually have within, you know, a water or sewer utility. And you allowed us to be able to do that, Dale.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not where you start, it's where you finish, but
Yeah.
you got to get in the game and providing them real life experiences and the ability to get a job and start to become independent and then really start to navigate, you know, adulthood.
Yeah.
And it's the soft skills. It's all the things that you and I talked about. And unfortunately, you know, back to, you know, who's taking charge of this. You know, when I was a kid and probably when you were a kid, you know, I used to be able to go shovel snow and I used to be able to mow lawns and work at restaurants and maybe do some, you know, farm work and, you know, bale some hay. And we had all these odd jobs that we were, you know, our parents just gave us to keep us busy, but also have a little bit of spare change in our pockets. But, you know, the skills that you learn through those experiences of working for somebody and, you know, being at work on time and having the proper, you know, dress attire and, you know, not being on your phones and being dedicated to the job and a half an hour lunch means a half an hour lunch and all those things. And it gives you that work ethic. I think, unfortunately, in today's society, there just doesn't seem to be as many of those opportunities for 13, 14, 15-year-old kids to learn those soft skills and really prepare themselves for, you know, that self-discipline and that dedication that it takes to be successful, whether you're going to college or you're going to work every day. Time management and, you know, understanding you're going to be working with some difficult people and you can't react to it all the time. And, you know, all those little things that are just so important to being a good employee. That I unfortunately don't think that the education system is really putting a value on.
Well, you hit it right on the head. I mean, this is part of what drives the work is you know, you look at the rest of the developed world, and when you're 16, you're in industry. You know, apprenticeships for youth are kind of the regular course of action. I think the Switzerland model is probably one of the better, where you have permeable. You're not stuck in any one career, but you're able to, you know, kind of transition based on your interests and talents as they grow and your competencies, experiences. And so this idea of, you know, building the kinds of soft skills, the real skills, the work skills that you need to be successful, getting kids engaged early, getting them engaged often. I mean, you were all about, hey, let's do this at K-8. Let's do it at middle school, elementary, high school, all levels. Let's get kids engaged and get them experiences. And I think equally, getting them the social capital connections. I mean, when you're my kids, we know who to call to get them, an introduction or an experience or an internship. But if you don't have that advocate, if you don't have somebody to help build or a system to help build that social capital, you're not going to get the experiences. You're not going to get an opportunity to connect to real people in real places, which is so important. I mean, I know that that's a critical space. I mean, maybe talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about, what are you seeing happening in the water industry where people aren't giving attention to this like you were. They were maybe not giving attention to developing the pipeline. What are water industry leaders doing to get talent? How's that working for them?
I think traditionally it's just, my father happened to be in the power industry, so I was always interested in utilities. So it's a vision, it's a world that I think most people are oblivious to. So I was fortunate, just like you say, that my dad kind of exposed me to that, at least that general idea of, utility field. But you're right. I mean, I think in San Bernardino and the areas that you and I both served, some of these kids just don't have visibility. They don't have exposure. So how can you do that? And I know we had job fairs and all those things, but what I really liked about your program, Dale, wasn't that we just didn't focus on making sure that they had the skills and the training to be able to get the certifications, but we really looked at it holistically, as you recall. We had mentorship. We had people assigned to each person in the program. We allowed them to ask questions and make sure they really were interested in that field before they just got pushed into it. But we also went ahead and talked to them and helped them with interviews and how to write a resume and how to talk to somebody and how to behave in the professional space.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately in this generation, with everything being on the phone, on the computer, they just don't have those interpersonal skills that we had as kids, and that's a huge gap. So I'm starting to see some of the leaders in the water and sewer field understand that they need to break through some of these barriers to make sure that they have that pipeline of the next employment population. Because if they're not, we're forced to go ahead and outsource these things, and that's not good economically for the organization. And I don't think it's really good for the public service organization that needs to be embedded in the community and needs to be invested and actually anchored into the community, so that the people see, hey, these people just aren't here to make a bunch of money and go to the 3 towns over. They don't only live here, they work here, they're invested here. So I really think that's the pathway to success. And obviously your program is all about that.
Yeah. I had recently heard from the Water Energy Education Alliance group who's had a conference in Southern California, and they were sharing how the water agencies for decades now have been teaching about water conservation. And they said, look, it's working. People are actually conserving water based on this, decades of education. They said, now it's time to shift gears and share the world of work related to water. What are the possible jobs that exist? I thought that was brilliant because it's exactly what you're saying. How do you get the word out? How do kids know that these jobs even exist? And, I remember talking to Jim Clifton one time, CEO of Gallup, and he wrote a book called The Coming Jobs War. And in that book, he said that, no matter where they went in the world, Gallup surveyed the planet. It didn't matter the color of your skin, the language you spoke, your income status, where you lived. Everybody in the world wants the same thing, and they want a good job to provide for their family. So I think it's brilliant. They're using, this space of launching for the next few decades to get kids to be aware of, young people to be aware of these careers and make those kinds of connections. I mean, it's really that visionary leadership that you've had, I see, is now echoed in, the larger space. I mean, East Valley Water District, one of the, I don't know, maybe smaller water districts in the state compared to some. And you were like this pebble in a pond. This work began to ripple out to others, and other water districts now across counties and regions are doing this kind of work because of your leadership. And I think that, it's going to go a long way for our communities, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we had, Dale, is our success was our biggest impediment. I think, especially in Southern California and the United States in general, we just really take water and sewer services for granted. It's just a given, right? Every time you turn on the water tap, the water comes out and
Yeah.
it's safe and it's not polluted. It's at the right pressure. It's at the right temperature. We're just spoiled. Same thing with sewer. I mean, you flush a toilet and it goes away. So we were so good at having people supremely confident in the availability and the dependability of that service that it was never on anybody's radar.
Yeah.
So what we had to do is say, hey, listen, we had to educate communities to understand how much infrastructure, how much forward thinking, and how many talented people it takes, to have those services available to us, and that we enjoy. Like we talked about, getting kids involved in water conservation and just understanding the water cycle at the elementary school level. And then as they progress and become more mature, and you start really thinking about what's next when you get out of school, diving into the jobs that are required to make that happen. And then ultimately, what skills or what education or what training and certificates you need to be able to get in that field. It's that progression and that on ramp and that ladder that I think you and I were able to develop, where he starts off with interest, then all of a sudden it becomes a passion, and then once you have that passion, then for these kids, and again, where you start isn't always where you finish. I mean, you could start off working in a treatment plant, and before you know it, you're the supervisor or you're the manager, or you could even cross over and get into public affairs or whatever. As you evolve, whatever talents come to the surface, there's opportunities for you. You're not pigeonholed into
Yeah.
one specific career.
Yeah.
But again, it starts with, you got to get them interested. You got to make them aware of the opportunities. And that was a big challenge for us, but I think we're overcoming that now.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'll, go back to David Rojas, one of the first hires from this kind of experience of, getting the internship, taking the courses at the community college while he was in high school to get the certifications necessary to meet the minimum qualifications for the job. And here he gets the job. And within his first few weeks, he actually struggled because he's like, man, it's hard work digging out in the heat of the day. But you come back a year later and he's in. I mean, he loves this space. He's passionate about it. And he sees that this is one public agency, an employer that invests in their people, because you're looking at their own upward mobility. I mean, offering the ability for tuition reimbursement to college. A lot of parents don't think about this. They're not thinking about, hey, the professional trades, I could get my kid access to, tuition assistance or college through these experiences. So some might say, do you go, college to career, or do you go career to college? And in David's case, it's career to college. He's in a career now, and when he sees that he needs college for promotability, he has an employer that does this work. And I think that's fabulous that I don't know if that's something all the water agencies offer, but that's fabulous that you offer that kind of upward mobility opportunity for people.
Well, that's how I got there, right? And I didn't get to be able to achieve the things I was able to achieve on my own. I mean, there was tuition assistance available to me. Obviously, I was a veteran, so I had the GI Bill as well. But again, I didn't go to college and I didn't start taking classes at night until I knew what I wanted to do with it. I had a target, and I was committed to that. And I went to school at night and tried to juggle, working and going to school. But, for me, there was a destination. I think too often these kids go into college really not knowing what the destination is. Or they get a political science degree, or they get some degree that it is not obvious what they're going to do when they get out.
Yeah.
And they really struggle with that transition. And unfortunately, you alluded to the data, they end up being underemployed, and they're saddled with a bunch of debt. And they're not even passionate about what they're doing. Now they're in a survival mode, right? We really need to break that cycle where we have very kind of specific training, and not be so focused on rushing that process of passion development. And let these kids get exposed to things so that then they can latch onto something. And now they're 100% invested, and they actually understand why they're making the sacrifices that they're making, or going through what they're going through, because they can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that it's going to be worth it in the long run. And I think you get better outcomes from an academic standpoint, and you obviously get better outcomes from an employer standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. It's inspiring to me. I mean, I think about, where we are now and compared to where we started. And when I remember the first year I started this work and just wondering, what am I doing? Is this is just such a new endeavor to try to create a system that supports, young people while they're in school to get connected to what's next. It's like you mentioned, we've connected young people in water operations and in water and cyber, all across the gamut of potential career positions. And we've heard back from employers, hey, this is the greatest hire I've ever had because these kids are getting the skills, the prerequisite skills and the soft skills before they ever step foot into the employer's environment. I want to talk with you in a minute about real change. But one of the things that in the next 5 years, but one of the things that inspired me when I was digging into this work 5 years ago and developing Tomorrow's Talent as an intermediary is I read a report by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation called the Future of Talent Finance. It was written in 2020. And in this report, they talked about, you've got to have this ecosystem you talked about earlier. You've got to have the employers that have leadership mindsets around this kind of work. You have to have education system leaders that have this kind of mindset about this work. And you need intermediaries to help bridge that kind of divide in space. And I know you know that, and you've seen that. You've seen the power of that ecosystem working together in your own backyard as former general manager of East Valley Water District and a leader in your space and industry. You saw that. You're a visionary leader for this work. What do you see as the real change that needs to happen in the next 5 to 10 years to really get this to take to scale and see more employers engaged, public and private, more school systems engaged in thinking about not just getting kids through the curriculum, but preparing kids with a life plan for success for life after high school. Let's talk to that a little bit. What do you see as the real change needed in the next 5 to 10 years for education, business leaders, all leaders that are touching this space?
Well, I think it's kind of a three-legged stool. Let's start with the employers. You can train everybody up. If they're not going to hire them, then it's just waste of everybody's time, right? So I think we need to continue working, and I think that trend is starting to take shape, where leaders in industry need to understand that they need to strategically really invest in look down range of who's going to be their employee group 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now. Not just wait for a job opening and then go try to find the most qualified person. I think they need to go ahead and cultivate that, especially in the public service space. Do it in the communities you serve. That's just a win-win, right? To me, it's obvious that if you're going to be in a public service, then you really need to invest in the community, like we talked about earlier. So you need to get leaders that are saying, hey, we're willing to dedicate our employees' time and energy to be mentors, to be inspirational, to meet with these kids and show them that this is a real opportunity, and this is how it's changed my life, and here's some things you can do. So again, that and then invest in it and put their money where their mouth is, number one. Number two, I think we really need to revamp the education apparatus, Dale. I mean, you and I have talked about it, and it's really a struggle, obviously, very bureaucratic, and people are invested in this pipeline right straight to college, and I get that, and that's great for some kids, maybe 30, 40%. But what about the other 60% of kids that aren't really on that pipeline or aren't really interested in that path?
Right.
That's a big number, and we need to kind of make sure that educators are incentivized and are rewarded for looking at the individual needs of the kids, not just looking at this is our curriculum, this is how we've always done it. There's all these impediments to change it. That needs to be broken down, and we need to be way more, I think, nimble in the education space to understand what's needed in the employment arena, and then go backwards and tailor education to fit the needs of the ever-changing economy.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I think you and I probably have some very similar social groups we work in. And, I'm not proud to say it, but a lot of the parents that my kids went to school with and hung out with, I mean, it was more about their ego and then their self-esteem that their kid was on the path to go to fill in the blank college.
Yeah.
And they almost took it personal if, their kid wasn't interested in that because they felt like a failure in their social group, honestly. I think we need to make sure that parents understand that, the way to provide that independence and success for your kids is to support what they enjoy, what they love, and be flexible with them that, hey, it's not about what sticker I have on my bumper or like car saying that my kid goes to Stanford or whatever pick a sticker.
Yeah.
It's like, no, my kid's got a great job. They're super happy.
Yeah.
They're on a path to be super independent. They don't have debt. and they're probably going to go to college, but not right now. They're going to do it again for a specific purpose, not because socially that's what's acceptable or that's what's admired. We got to change all three of those. So the education apparatus needs to be more flexible and willing to change to meet the needs. Employers need to understand that they can't just manage existing employees. They need to make sure they're investing and providing for opportunities for the future generation. And then parents need to get off the ego kick about, the only reason, my kid goes to college, so it makes me feel good when I'm in a cocktail party. Yeah. All three of those need to change.
Yeah. Yeah. John, thanks. It's always so great to talk with you and our listeners. This is the Bridge to Tomorrow's Talent, where we're really exploring these real world challenges and inspiring solutions. And you've heard from one leader, John Mura, former CEO, former GM of East Valley Water District, now doing some private consulting. And I know that he is teaching other leaders how to think like this, to think about an ecosystem. As you do with water, you've got to plan 5, 10, 20, 100 years in advance when we're thinking. And we should think that way about our young people. When we have such high disengagement rates of young people in our communities, such high under and unemployment rates of even our college graduate students, we've got work to do, America. So we're looking for success in the real world. If you would like to connect to today's guest, John Mura. John, how could people get in touch with you if they wanted to connect with you and maybe learn more about how they do this work themselves?
They can shoot me an email at john@kellerconsulting.com with a hyphen in between Keller and consulting, or check out my website at www.kellerconsulting. Drop me a note, shoot me a message, and just just get involved and understand that it is so rewarding. It's not always about your own success. It's about the success that you can create around you. And I know, Dale, earlier you talked about you didn't really know what you're doing with Tomorrow's Talent. And I can tell you firsthand, when you're changing lives, you're changing communities, and you're really inspiring a lot of people to, think about how we can make the next generation better. And you're obviously embedded in doing that. So you shouldn't wonder if you've got a purpose, if your time is being spent wisely. I can attest to you and your audience that you are. And I'm just proud to be part of a small part of what you've been able to accomplish. And I thank you so much for what you created.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So grateful. And let's keep building this bridge to tomorrow's talent together. To our audience, we'll see you on the next episode. John, thank you so much.